Does this kind of instill any confidence going into another round of trade talks this weekend?
I think that's the critical question, Heidi. I think there's a kind of a lack of visibility as to where this is going. There was an expectation a few weeks ago, as you mentioned, that perhaps progress was being made, but we seem to have had something of a hawkish turn again by the US administration in recent days. So I think the talks this weekend will be critical to see what direction we get out of those. And then as we head towards, of course, let's not forget the security dialogue that's ongoing with North Korea, which is another complicating variable in all of this, to see how that plays out. So I think there are several hurdles to go before we do get clarity and visibility as to whether or not the US and China can reach a meaningful agreement that would certainly boost confidence and lift fears, or whether this is going to be more of a lingering, drawn-out affair.
You know, the news piece that came out overnight about this disagreement between Peter Navarro, this trade hawk, who's an economic advisor, saying that, this trade war is very much still on, criticising essentially the Treasury Secretary. Does that also kind of give us an indication that, forget transparency, there's also not a great deal, consensus within the negotiating team?
I think that's fair, Heidi. There also doesn't seem to be a single voice or a single message coming from the US side. I mean, remember, we had the Treasury Secretary saying that the tariff war was effectively off for now. Then we've had this turnaround by both President Trump and, like Mr. Navarro, like you mentioned. On the China side, they've been consistent throughout. They have said they're willing to retaliate if they're forced into a trade war. They've also said they're willing to negotiate and make concessions where necessary, especially on the good side of it. But we all know that fundamentally, the real hard area will be getting China to make concessions on its Made in 2025 ambitions for a state-sponsored, very high-tech economy. That's where the really hard negotiations will come, even if there is something of a near-term breakthrough on the good side.
It's quite instructive to see what happened with ZTE, though, that which way do you actually approach the trade issue? Because you can argue that Donald Trump has some legitimate complaints. The thing is, does he go through these negotiations in a trade war, or does he do it the way that the ZTE was dealt with?
Yeah, well, ZTE muddled the whole issue in so many respects. That was a security and a sanctions issue. It was suddenly put into the mix of a broader trade negotiation. If we make concessions to you in ZTE, we might be willing to make other concessions with you on the trade side of things. It all became a bit of a complicated outlook. And we still don't quite know where that ZTE story is going to end, by the way. Mr. Trump has spoken of concessions, but the details still remain, and that's what's critical, I think.